Hello again, everyone. Finishing off Philadelphia week, I'm going to look at the Eagles of the NFL. So the Eagles are probably the most intriguing team, I'm going to say, of the four big teams that are in Philadelphia. Obviously, I've talked about the Phillies of the MLB, the Flyers of the NHL, the 76ers of the NBA, and now, like I said today, finishing off the week, the Eagles of the NFL, who I think, like I said, are the most intriguing team of the professional sports teams that are in the league. I do think the Sixers are up and coming team. They're going to be developing and growing for a little while. The Flyers are just going to miss the playoffs, so look for a playoff run from them next year. And the Phillies, I think, are going to have a tough year with the loss of some of their big name players in Jimmy Rollins and Bird. But today it's all about the Eagles. So looking at the Eagles, obviously they had a very active offseason, very interesting offseason. I think some of the moves they made kind of were big surprises. For the big trade, obviously, with the Bills acquiring Kiko Alonso for their running back LaShawn McCoy. Last year, McCoy rushed for over 1,300 yards on 312 carries and 5 touchdowns for the Eagles. So obviously that's a big hit to their run game. And the Bills definitely have improved that spot. Losing C.J. Spiller, the Bills did need to find somebody to run the ball, and finding McCoy to do that, the Bills definitely got that void filled for sure. Kiko Alonso obviously is coming off of an injury last season, so we'll have to see how well he bounces back from that. I do think the Eagles definitely lost in that trade, but I do think they did get a solid linebacker in Kiko Alonso who will produce for the team and will help on the defensive side of the ball for sure. Even if McCoy was still with the team, if you can find running backs that can rush the ball and get you yards, if your defense can't stop the run, you're not going to win a lot of games. So having Kiko Alonso in there will hopefully help them with their pass rush and help them with their run defense as well. They did sign DeMarco Murray and Matthews in the offseason, so I think those two guys will help to fill the void for McCoy. I don't think they're 300 plus carry guys individually. I think if they could each go, 150 to 200 yards per carry for each guy, I think that would be good. I think that's a solid 1-2 punch. They're both different styles of runners, so that allows your offense to be a little more dynamic, I think, as well. So I think, losing McCoy and getting Alonso was great, and then you filled that void of not having McCoy in your backfield anymore by signing DeMarco Murray and Ryan Matthews for your running backs. So that I think will be solid for them. The other big trade, obviously, was when they traded to the Rams. Obviously, the trade with the Rams, getting Sam Bradford and a 5th-round pick for their quarterback last season, Nick Foles, and a 4th-round pick and a 2nd-round pick in 2016. So, again, I don't think it was an even trade. I do think the Rams won out on that trade as well. Maybe Bradford does just need to change the scenery, and the Eagles can be the place where that can happen. The 5th-round pick also, depending on how great your scouts are doing, you can find some sleepers in the 5th round, so we'll see what happens with that. They do also still have Mark Sanchez. Last year, he threw for over 2,400 yards, 198 completions for 309 attempts with 14 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. So, again, I think they're going to be competing for that starting quarterback job this upcoming year, Mark Sanchez and Sam Bradford. Ultimately, though, I do think when you make a trade like that, Sam Bradford is going to get the starts. But if he struggles out at the beginning of the season, and after 4 weeks they're 1-3 or something, I wouldn't be surprised if Mark Sanchez got the ball. Also, when you have DeMarco Murray and Ryan Matthews, is going to allow you to continue to run the ball, so Sam Bradford isn't going to have to step in and be throwing it 35, 40 times a night. However, I am now going to talk about the receivers and the weapons he does have, where he maybe didn't have those options when he was playing for St. Louis. Jeremy Maclin is obviously the big wide receiver on the team for sure. Last year he had 1,318 yards on 85 receptions and 10 touchdowns. I don't see him slowing down at all. I don't see why he couldn't have another 1,000-yard season. That's definitely a possibility for him for sure. They did sign Miles Austin recently, so I think that's another solid number 2, number 3 receiver who will allow Maclin to maybe get a little more open and have a 1,500-yard season. We'll see what happens with that. Another 2 receivers I'm going to mention are Matthews with 2 T's, so that's a wide receiver. They got a running back, Matthews, 1 T, wide receiver, Matthews, 2 T's. That's how you can differentiate between the two, as well as Cooper. When you look at those two guys combined last year, they had 122 receptions for 11 touchdowns and over 1,400 yards. I do think combine those guys this upcoming year, if Bradford can have a solid season, and if he doesn't, Sanchez steps in and he can find them the ball. I do think they're going to have opportunities to get some receptions, to get some yards as well, because Jeremy Maclin and Miles Austin are going to be the guys that cornerbacks and defensive backs are going to be paying the most attention to. So there's going to be opportunities where Matthews and Cooper are now the number 4, number 5 receiver and kind of get lost in the shuffle, that they might not get the attention they deserve and are going to be able to get some easy receptions. So between those two guys this upcoming year, I could easily see 150 receptions between the two, 15 plus touchdowns, and 1,500 plus yards between those two. So that'll be interesting to see what happens with them. They also got a solid tight end in Ertz, who last year had 702 yards on 58 receptions for 3 touchdowns. So that's a position that I think when it comes to receiving tight ends, you have Jimmy Graham and Rob Gronkowski, I think, kind of overshadow everybody else. I think they're the two big names as tight end, receiving tight ends kind of thing, and then everybody else kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But if you can have a tight end who can have a 700-yard receiving season with 58 receptions, that gives you a guy tight on the line that can sneak out and get those 10, 15-yard passes that you need. And, when you're in those 2nd and 7th situations, it gives you another pass threat in the tight end position. So keep an eye on those receivers this upcoming year, because now Sam Bradford has some weapons he can use, and Mark Sanchez, depending on how Sam Bradford starts off the season, he'll have weapons as well to use. So we'll see what happens with that. Other people they signed this upcoming season, flipping over to the defensive side of the ball, some cornerbacks in Maxwell and Thurman, as well as some linebackers in Graham and Jones. So obviously defense does win championships, and the Eagles definitely have the offensive threats and the offensive weapons to score 20 plus points per game. So that shouldn't be the offense shouldn't be the problem. If there is going to be a problem, it's not going to be on the offensive side of the ball. I don't think it will be on the defensive side of the ball. Your defense needs to be able to stop the run, stop the pass, and keep the opposing offense off the scoreboard. And when you look at their team offense and team defense last year, their team offense was 3rd in points. The Eagles' offense last year were averaging 29.6 points per game, but their team defense was 23rd in points, giving up 25 points per game. So that's why last year they did have a 10-6 record. So it's not that they didn't have a horrible season. It's not that they can't be a Super Bowl contending team. But to be better, you can be 3rd in the league in points, but if your defense is in the bottom 5 and the bottom 10 and giving up points, you're going to struggle when it gets to the playoffs, and that's what could potentially happen this year unless the defense can step up. Their team defense was also 28th in giving up yards. They were giving up 375.6 yards per game, 31st against the pass, 264.9 yards per game. But they were 15th against the rush, 110.7 rushing yards per game. So that's still 15th in the league. So that proves how important having a good run game can be. Because if you're 15th in the league and still giving up 110 rushing yards, that needs to obviously be improved. So looking forward to how their defense can improve this upcoming year. If your rush defense can keep the opposing run game to under 100 yards per game, and you can get the pass game to under 250 yards per game, that's only dropping the pass game down 15 yards and the rush game and the running game 10 yards. Not a huge task, not a huge undertaking, and definitely reachable. And that's what's going to force your opposing offense to throw the ball more, because if you can establish you got a solid run defense, then they're not going to be able to run the ball. They're going to be throwing it more, and that's when mistakes can happen. That's when interceptions can happen. And, you get your defense off the field quickly because incomplete passes and that kind of stuff leads to 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10 situations because they can't run the ball, and now they got to be passing it further than they need to, so it takes more time for the plays to develop. And if you can get your linebackers and your defensive linemen putting pressure on the quarterback, you're going to have a successful season. So that's how I think they can improve this year. On a 10-6 record, it's hard to say where they can improve on because that is a solid record in the NFL. But if they want to make a deep playoff push, that's where they need to make some improvements in order to make a deep run in the playoffs. Their offense last year, again, wasn't the problem. They were 5th in the league in yards, 396.8, 6th in the pass, 272.2, and 9th in the rush at 124.5. So, again, losing LeSean McCoy, he was part of the big reason why they were the top 10 in rush for sure, obviously. But DeMarco Murray and Ryan Matthews are obviously going to be able to step in and hopefully keep the Eagles in the top 10 in the rush, because that's what's going to allow them to be successful, is by keeping the opposing defense on edge when their offense is on the field. Because if they can establish a solid run game, it opens up the pass game. It's going to allow players like Macklin to have another 1,200 plus yard season. It's going to allow receivers like Matthews and Cooper and tight end Ertz to get open and get those receptions and those yards that they need to win some games. And bringing in Miles Austin is a proven veteran, good guy to have on your team. He's going to get some attention from opposing cornerbacks and running backs. So that's what's going to allow your team to continue to grow and develop and improve. And I think this season the Eagles can make a deep playoff push. Especially they got a first year head coach last year, obviously coming from Oregon. He came from a very successful college program, and I think that's sometimes where college coaches coming to the NFL, a lot of discussion with that is how successful are they going to be. The college game doesn't always necessarily transfer to the NFL game, that kind of thing. And I think it's just a different atmosphere. In college football, when you're the head coach, you can decide which players are going to suit up, which players aren't going to suit up. You don't have a GM and an owner over your head. You have the athletic director at your university telling you what to do, or advising you what to do and saying what kind of money you have to scout and that kind of stuff. But ultimately, when it comes to game day, it's your decision, and that can be tricky to happen when you come to the NFL, because if you have players on your team that are making $10 million plus salaries, it's hard for you to go to the GM and the owner and say, I need you to trade this guy because he doesn't work in my playbook, he doesn't work in the schemes I play. They're going to kind of look at you and say, well, sorry, you need to find a way to make him work. I don't know if that's part of the reason why they traded Nick Foles away. Maybe he just wasn't working in Kelly's system, and maybe Bradford will have a better chance of working in his system. Maybe trading away again with Sean McCoy. Maybe he wasn't a great running back for Kelly's system. But again, those were big moves, big trades that I don't think a lot of people saw coming. Definitely is going to shake things up in Philadelphia, and I think it shows that they're not afraid to take some chances. They're not afraid to take some risks, and they have the talent on the offensive side of the ball to do it. It's just the defense needs to step up. If they can do that, they can have a deep playoff push. Thank you again for tuning in this week for Philadelphia Week. Next week, I'm going to be talking about New Orleans, so I'll be looking at the Pelicans of the NBA and the Saints of the NFL. The Saints are my football team, so I'll be having a lot of good talk about them next week for sure. Good luck to the Eagles in this upcoming season. At least you don't play in the same division as my Saints. If we meet you in the NFC Championship game, great. So good luck to the Eagles this upcoming year. Thank you again for watching. You can follow me on Twitter at GHIM614, and I'll talk to you next week about New Orleans. Thanks again. Bye-bye.